History is full of instances where mass shooters have made the news and struck fear in people. Most of these incidents are only one-day events, single locations, often with multiple victims. However, in this case, the two killers crossed the country, randomly shooting people as the opportunities presented themselves. It was during the month of October 2002 when a series of shootings rocked the Northern Virginia, Southern Maryland, and Washington, D.C. metro area. What was most disturbing was the wide area covered during the crime spree and the apparent random nature of the shootings. There did not seem to be a common denominator linking the victims together, but there was a prior history and a diabolical motive that led to these events. Who were John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo? How far did their rampage extend? How did they shoot so many people and evade capture for so long? What was their motive?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, military veteran, historian, author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
People all over the United States would become acquainted with the names of John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo as a result of their arrest in a shooting spree that made international headlines. But most people who follow these events did not know that their murderous activity started much earlier that year, information that came out later after they were arrested and charged for killing 10 people and wounding 3 in the Washington, D.C. area. John Allen Muhammad was born John Allen Williams on December 31, 1960 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. In August 1978, Muhammad enlisted in the Louisiana Army National Guard as a combat engineer and transferred to the regular Army on November 6, 1985, and was trained as a mechanic, truck driver, and specialist metal worker. He changed his surname in 2001, long after joining the Nation of Islam in 1987, and was a follower of the racist anti-Semite Louis Farrakhan, providing security during the Million Man March that was actually nothing of the kind. His father and mother were Ernest and Ava Williams, and the family moved to New Orleans when his mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. She died when he was only 3 years old, and his father abandoned the family, leaving John to be raised by his maternal grandfather and an aunt. Muhammad had served in the Army, was divorced twice, and his second ex-wife, Mildred Muhammad, was granted a restraining order alleging abuse. Muhammad was arrested on federal charges of violating a restraining order by possessing a weapon. They had been married and had 3 children, and he lost custody in a divorce. In 1999, he kidnapped his children and took them to Antigua, but he was wanted on credit card and immigration documentation fraud. It was during this time that he became close with Lee Boyd Malvo, a Jamaican child who later acted as his partner in the killings. Lee Boyd Malvo also went by the name John Lee Malvo, and he had lived with Muhammad in his duplex in Tacoma, Washington, for about a year prior to the start of the shootings. The first killing was February 16, 2002, when Kenya Cook, 21, was shot in East Tacoma, Washington. Her aunt was a friend of Muhammad's ex-wife, shot by Malvo. After his arrest, Malvo confessed to the murder, stating that Muhammad told him to do it. In 2004, Washington State decided not to press charges against Malvo because Cook's killing, quote, did not include the aggravating factors, end quote, that would lead to sentencing beyond that already imposed in Virginia. The next killing was on March 19, 2002, when 60-year-old Jerry Taylor was killed on a golf course in Tucson, Arizona. Malvo confessed to the murder to Tucson police in October 2006 and was given immunity from prosecution. On August 1, 2002, in Hammond, Louisiana, Malvo shot 58-year-old John Gaeta in the neck with a .22 caliber revolver. Gaeta was badly wounded, but survived. Ironically, he received a letter of apology from Malvo in 2010. On September 5, 2002, Malvo shot Paul Arufa 5 times outside his restaurant in Clinton, Maryland, LaRufa miraculously survived, and he testified in the Virginia trial, supporting Muhammad's resentencing to life with the possibility of parole. On September 14, 2002, 22-year-old Rupinder Beni Oberoi was shot and wounded outside the Hillendale Beer and Wine store in Silver Spring, Maryland. To quote the CNN report, the shooting is linked by circumstances, witnesses, and location of the alleged snipers, but not by ballistics. The following month, in November 2002, Montgomery County Police Captain Nancy Demi stated that they had officially linked Oberoi shooting to the other sniper shootings. On September 15, 2002, Muhammad Rashid was shot at a Brandywine, Maryland liquor store and survived. Rashid, who had a clear view of his shooter, later testified and identified Malvo as the shooter in court. Then on September 21, 2002, 41-year-old Milligan Voldemariam was shot 3 times outside a liquor store in Atlanta and died of his wounds. Ballistics matched a .22 caliber handgun to both the Atlanta and the Montgomery County, Maryland shootings. No charges were ever brought by Georgia. On September 21, 2002, liquor store owner Claudine Parker was killed and clerk Kelly Adams seriously wounded in Montgomery, Alabama. The ballistics matched the Bushmaster .223 connected to later shootings, and the various eyewitnesses also connected Muhammad and Malvo to the crime. Capital murder charges were filed against both Muhammad and Malvo after police in Montgomery, Alabama, confirmed that fingerprints recovered matched Malvo's U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service card. However, due to the charges pending in Virginia and the fact there was a death sentence requested, Alabama also decided not to prosecute Muhammad or Malvo. On September 23, 2002, Muhammad and Malvo killed 45-year-old Hong M. Ballinger outside a beauty shop in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Both were charged with capital murder and armed robbery on October 31st after the ballistics examination matched the same Bushmaster .223 rifle. Louisiana also declined to prosecute Muhammad or Malvo due to the trial pending in Virginia. 3 days later, on September 26, 2002, Wright Williams Jr. was shot and wounded at his grocery store in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Muhammad and Malvo were not charged for his shooting either due to the charges they were already facing, but the incident is later used to prove similar circumstances in Muhammad's trial. Muhammad and Malvo returned to the D.C. area, and on October 2, 2002, one of the two fired a shot through a window at Michael's Craft Store in Aspen Hill, Maryland, but no one was injured. Later that same day, 55-year-old James D. Martin, a program analyst for the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, was killed in the parking lot of Shoppers Food Warehouse in Wheaton, Maryland. Then the next day, on October 3, 2002, 39-year-old landscaper James L. Buchanan was killed while mowing a lawn at a business near Rockville, Maryland. Then on the same day, cab driver 54-year-old Premkumar Walekar was killed at a gas station in the Aspen Hill area of Montgomery County, Maryland. Then again, on the same day, 34-year-old Sarah Ramos of Silver Spring, Maryland was killed at the post office near the Leisure World Shopping Center. A witness reported seeing a white van or truck leave the parking lot after the shooting, which directed police to a wrong vehicle. Also on October 3, 2002, 25-year-old Lori Ann Lewis Rivera of Silver Spring was killed at a Shell gas station in Kensington. Then again, on the same day, 72-year-old Pascal Charlot was shot in the chest walking along Georgia Avenue. An hour later, he died in the hospital. Muhammad and Malvo took a break for the rest of the day. October 4, 2002 saw the two shooters camped in a Michael's parking lot in Fredericksburg, Virginia, where they shot 43-year-old Caroline Sewell as she placed her bags inside her Toyota minivan. She survived and was released from a hospital in Fairfax, Virginia on October 14th. Then, on October 7, 2002, 13-year-old Ian Brown was shot in the chest and outside his school, Benjamin Tasker Middle School in Bowie, Maryland. He survived and later testified at Muhammad's trial. 2 days later, on October 9, 2002, a tarot death card was discovered near the scene of the shooting at the school with the message, Call Me God written upon it. That same day, not long after the tarot card was found, 53-year-old Dean Harold Myers of Gaithersburg, Maryland, was killed at a gas station in Manassas, Virginia. Witnesses again described a white minivan being in the area, which was stopped by police, but the driver and the vehicle were cleared of any suspicion. On October 11, 2002, 53-year-old Kenneth Bridges from Philadelphia was killed at an Exxon station just off I-95 near Fredericksburg, Virginia. Due to more witnesses seeing a white van with a ladder rack on the roof, the police created a huge roadblock trying to find a Chevy Astro type of vehicle. October 14, 2002, 47-year-old Linda Franklin of Arlington, Virginia was killed in a Home Depot parking lot in Falls Church, Virginia. On October 19, 2002, 37-year-old Jeffrey Hopper was shot in the parking lot of a Ponderosa Steakhouse near I-95 in Ashland, Virginia. Hopper survived and doctors removed the bullet on October 21st. Ballistics confirmed it was the same weapon used in other shootings. After nearly a week of laying low, Muhammad and Malvo were back at work, and on October 22, 2002, bus driver 35-year-old Conrad Johnson of Oxon Hill, Maryland, was shot when he reached the top step inside his commuter bus in Aspen Hill, Maryland, and he died in hospital in Bethesda. Finally, on October 24, 2002, John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo were found sleeping in Muhammad's blue 1990 Chevy Caprice at a rest stop in Frederick County, Maryland, and arrested. He had purchased the former police car in New Jersey on September 11, 2002. Muhammad admitted to police that he admired Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda and that he had approved of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. Malvo told police that Muhammad planned on making money and establishing a terrorist training camp in Canada for children. It appeared that all the killings were a ruse to deflect from Muhammad's real ambition, eventually killing Mildred, his ex-wife, to get custody of his 3 children. Prosecutors said the shootings were part of a plot to extort $10 million from local and state governments. According to the Seattle Times, quote, the prosecution called more than 130 witnesses and introduced more than 400 pieces of evidence intended to prove that Muhammad undertook the murders and ordered Malvo to help carry it out. End quote. Evidence included a rifle found in Muhammad's car that was linked by ballistics tests to 8 of the 10 killings in the Washington area and 2 others in Louisiana and Alabama. The car, which was modified so that a sniper could shoot from inside the trunk, and a laptop computer were also found in the car that contained maps with icons pinpointing shooting scenes. Witness accounts put Muhammad across the street from one shooting and his car near the scene of several others. There was also a recorded phone call to a police hotline in which a man, his voice identified by a detective as Muhammad's, demanded money in exchange for stopping the shootings.
Don't say anything, just listen. Where are the people that are causing the killing in your area?
Both were arraigned and Malvo was charged as an adult. John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo were both convicted, and Muhammad received a death sentence. During his own trial, Malvo said he lied when he claimed to be the shooter in all cases in order to save Muhammad from the death penalty, as he believed that he would not face the death penalty being a minor. In 2 days of testimony, Malvo outlined detailed aspects of all the shootings, but he was convicted and received several life sentences without parole in both Maryland and Virginia. Under Virginia law, at that time, a defendant convicted of capital murder was allowed to choose the method by which he or she will be put to death, either lethal injection or electrocution. As Muhammad declined to select a method, by law, the method of lethal injection was selected for him. He was offered a selection of a last meal, which he accepted. Muhammad's last meal consisted of chicken, red sauce, and cake. Muhammad was executed on November 10, 2009. But Malvo's story would continue, and on May 26, 2017, a federal judge overturned 2 of Malvo's life sentences in Virginia, but his other Virginia convictions remained, as well as his previous life sentences from Maryland. On June 21, 2018, a federal appeals court ruled that Malvo's 4 life sentences without parole in Virginia were to be vacated. This was based on the 2012 Supreme Court decision citing the 8th Amendment, that it was unconstitutional for juveniles to receive mandatory life sentences without the possibility of parole. The state of Virginia appealed the decision. On March 18, 2019, the state Supreme Court took up Malvo's case in Virginia, and in February 2020, Malvo's sentences of life without parole in Virginia were commuted to life with the possibility of parole after the state changed the law concerning juveniles being given such sentences. But Malvo was less fortunate, where his sentence of life without parole in Maryland was not reversed. As a result, Malvo was eligible for parole in 2022, but he was denied parole. However, after filing another appeal, on August 26, 2022, a Maryland appeals court ruled that Malvo must be resentenced, and on August 30, 2022, the Virginia Parole Board denied him parole. Malvo is currently in the Red Onion State Prison in Virginia, where he is serving his life sentences, and the judge noted that it may be an academic question in Mr. Malvo's case because he would first have to be granted parole in Virginia before his consecutive life sentences in Maryland even began. Muhammad's motive for mass murder was to cover up the eventual murder of an ex-wife in order to gain custody of his children, while dragging a juvenile along for the ride, and also to take the fall if anything went wrong. Yes, there are monsters among us. Mass murders, in particular mass shootings, are nothing new to the American landscape. All of these episodes have commonalities, but there are also some major differences, such as political, racial, and strictly personal motivations. Most mass shooters leave behind a written trail for their motives, such as letters or a manifesto. A few mass shooters have accomplices who shared their twisted viewpoints, but most are solo operators.
Let's examine one of the earliest mass shootings.
Who was Mark Essex? What were his personal experiences turning him into a racial-hating person? What did he actually do?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History.
Mark James Robert Essex was born on August 12, 1949 in Emporia, Kansas, the second of 5 children to Mark Henry and Nellie Essex. They were a religious family, and his father worked as a foreman in a meatpacking plant, while his mother was a preschool children's counselor for disadvantaged families. As a boy, Essex liked the Cub Scouts and played saxophone in his high school band. He was also enjoying hunting and fishing, and during his teens, he considered becoming a minister. Essex was popular in high school, and his only encounter with the police was in 1965. While driving, he was pulled over when an officer mistakenly assumed he was too young to drive because Essex was only 5 feet 4 inches tall. An interesting fact was that, despite his later racial opinions, he dated both black and white girls, once telling his mother that he did not see much difference between girls of different races. He was an average student, but did well enough in technical subjects and graduated from Emporia High School in 1967. He attended Emporia State University, but for only 1 semester, and then worked at the same meatpacking plant where his father worked. He considered joining the Army, but then decided upon the Navy to get technical training for a later civilian career. Essex enlisted in the Navy on January 13, 1969 on a 4-year contract and was stationed at Naval Air Station, Imperial Beach, California. According to his family, his experiences in the Navy were positive. He completed his training at the Naval Training Center with high reviews and enrolled in the Navy Dental Center. Essex became a dental technician in April 1969, specializing in endodontics and periodontics, and formed a close relationship with his white supervisor, Lieutenant Robert Hatcher. Essex began experiencing racism in various forms while in the Navy, and it began forming his ideology. He also saw the differences while working as a bartender at an enlisted men's club called the Jolly Rotor, where certain rooms were off limits to blacks. In a letter to his mother, Essex described his disappointment, noting that racial relations in the Navy were not like he thought they would be, not like Emporia. Blacks have trouble getting along here. Essex believed that he would be better treated once he achieved a higher rank, but even afterward the harassment continued, leading him to start taking sedatives. He developed a friendship with a black sailor, Rodney Frank, who worked in the aircraft intermediate maintenance department. Frank was a self-described black militant who suggested that Essex read the literature by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, the co-founders of the Black Panther Party. By the summer of 1970, Essex had become radicalized. In August 1970, he was involved in a physical altercation with a white NCO, striking him after overhearing him say how beautiful it must have been in the past when a N-word went to sea it was below decks in the galley. Both men reached a compromise to avoid disciplinary action. The fact that he had struck a white sailor of senior rank intensified the harassment from other white personnel. On October 19, 1970, Essex went UA, or unauthorized absence, also known as AWOL. He called his mother from a bus station, telling her, "I'm coming home. I've just got to have some time to think." He remained in Emporia in UA status until November 16, 1970. He told his family about the discrimination he and others experienced, explaining his growing hatred. After a month, his family persuaded him to return to Imperial Beach. Before doing so, Essex made sure to speak with Lieutenant Hatcher, explaining his reasons for desertion. According to Hatcher's official notes, Essex said, "I don't want to have anything more to do with the Navy. It wouldn't be fair, not to you or the dental patients. The bad atmosphere would affect my work. The work is the only thing on this base I like." Essex then agreed to plead guilty to the charge of desertion. Hatcher defended Essex at the court-martial, praising his work ethic and stating that ongoing racial discrimination was the sole reason for his desertion. The judge was sympathetic and sentenced Essex to 30 days restriction to base and forfeiture of $90 of his pay, which is about $720 in today's money, for 2 months. On February 11, 1971, Essex was given a general discharge for unsuitability, which angered him as he felt unfairly stigmatized and the racial problems were never addressed. Essex then dove deeper into Black Panther ideology and called himself Mata and embraced the extremist ideas found in the 1968 book Black Rage. He returned home in April 1971 and bought a Ruger 44 caliber semi-automatic carbine through the mail order of a Montgomery Ward outlet in Emporia. He began incessantly practicing his marksmanship in the countryside, and in August, without informing his parents, he left for Louisiana, possibly to reconnect with his friend, Rodney Frank. Essex moved homes 4 times between 1971 and 1972 before settling in a 2-room apartment at 2619 Dryades Street in Central City in early November 1972, where he observed the poverty in the city's housing projects. On August 22, 1972, he applied to the federally funded Total Community Action, or TCA program, and was accepted. Essex enrolled in a course in vending machine repair and was at the top of his class. He also took an African studies course, memorizing African terms and dialects in his apartment. Many of these words, along with hate slogans in English, Swahili, and Zulu, would later be found written on the walls and ceilings of his apartment. He then bought a Colt .38 caliber revolver, and living a solitary life while battling severe depression, something happened to turn Essex even harder into hatred. In September 1972, the New Orleans Police Department created the Felony Action Squad to reduce violent crime, and Superintendent Clarence Giruso stated that squad members were authorized to shoot to kill if threatened. In October, Essex visited his family in Emporia and seemed to be upbeat and enthusiastic, which led his parents to believe he had recovered from his bitter experiences in the Navy. On November 16th, Essex learned that 2 black Southern University students had been shot and killed by East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's deputies during a campus demonstration. Essex became quite upset and decided to take action against what he saw as police oppression. Essex then wrote a letter to his mother stating, "Africa, this is it, Mom. It's even bigger than you and I, even bigger than God. I have now decided that the white man is my enemy. I will fight to gain my manhood or die trying. Love, Jimmy," using his nickname as a child. On December 27, 1972, he dined with a fellow student's family and later phoned his own family, making a point to speak with each member individually. He conveyed no sense of distress during the call. Essex then gave away most of his personal possessions to friends, telling acquaintances and neighbors that he intended to return to Emporia, though this was not his true plan. Essex then wrote a letter to WWL-TV, signing it Mata. In the letter, he announced his intention to attack the New Orleans Police Department on December 31st. He cited vengeance for the deaths of the 2 innocent brothers killed during the Southern University Civil Rights demonstration as his primary justification. Around 10:55 p.m. on New Year's Eve 1972, Essex parked his car and walked along Perdido Street, 1 block away from the New Orleans Police Department headquarters, armed with the Ruger .44 caliber carbine, his .38 caliber revolver, a large supply of ammunition, a gas mask, wire cutters, lighter fluid, matches, firecrackers, all carried in a green duffel bag. He hid behind parked cars in the dimly lit parking lot across from the Central Police Jail and then fired at 19-year-old Cadet Bruce Weatherford as he was reporting for duty. Weatherford instinctively dove for cover behind a parked car, and Cadet Alfred Harrell, also 19 and black, ran across the sally port to assist him. Harrell was fatally shot once in the chest, and the same bullet passed through him and struck Lieutenant Horace Perez in the ankle after it ricocheted off a wall. Essex fled the scene, but he was not finished. He continued his rampage on January 7, 1973, and was then called the New Orleans Sniper. He shot more people, and the police arrived, creating a standoff with Essex, who positioned himself on the building's rooftop. The sheer scale of the response, including the use of a military helicopter, underscored the severity of the situation and the threat Essex posed as the casualties mounted. However, despite efforts to negotiate his surrender by the police, Essex, who had barricaded himself on the rooftop of the hotel, made a final desperate charge which ended in his death under a hail of bullets. When it was all over, Essex had killed 9 people, including 5 police officers, and wounded 12 others, including 5 more police officers in both shooting sprees. His dead victims were Police Cadet Alfred Harrell, gunshot wound to the chest; Officer Edwin Hosley Sr., also a gunshot wound to the chest and stomach; Dr. Robert Stiegel, a hotel guest, with a gunshot wound to the chest; his wife, Elizabeth Stiegel, hotel guest, gunshot wound to the head; Frank Schneider, the hotel assistant manager, gunshot wound to the head; Walter Sherwood Collins, the hotel general manager, gunshot wounds to back and stomach; Officer Philip Coleman, with a gunshot wound to the head; Officer Paul Arland Persigo, with a gunshot wound to the face; Deputy Police Superintendent Louis Sirgo, gunshot wound to the chest and back. Those wounded were Lieutenant Horace Perez, with a ricochet wound to the ankle; Joseph Pernicaro, grocer, gunshot wound to the upper right shoulder; New Orleans fireman Joseph Anderson, with a gunshot wound to the arm; Patrolman Charles Arnold, shot in the face; Officer Lawrence Arthur, gunshot wound to the side; Robert Beamish, a hotel guest, shot in the abdomen; Patrolman Michael Burrell, smoke inhalation, hand and back injuries sustained in the fall; New Orleans fireman Thomas Calamari, gunshot wound to the arm; Christopher Heaton, ambulance driver, shot in the back; Patrolman Robert Childress smoke inhalation. Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Deputy Michael Munch with gunshot wounds to leg and neck. Sergeant Emmanuel Palmisano, gunshot wounds to arm and back. Officer Kenneth Solis, gunshot wound to shoulder and back. New Orleans fireman Timothy Urson, gunshot wound to shoulder and chest. Essex had planned both events, but his victims were apparently random, and the map of New Orleans marked with the locations of police headquarters and the Howard Johnson's Hotel indicated the deliberate nature of his actions, as he had clearly targeted these sites with a specific purpose in mind, although he did not have specific targets. The police searched his apartment, where they found the slogans written on the walls in English and Bantu, which reflected Essex's embrace of a broader revolutionary identity that transcended national boundaries. The inscription, "My destiny lies in the bloody death of racist pigs," underscored his belief that violence was the only means to achieve his goals, while the reference to the Third World and "Kill Pig Nixon" and his running dogs tied his personal mission to a global struggle against perceived imperialist forces. One of those killed, Deputy Police Superintendent Louis Sirgo, who had long advocated for addressing the root causes of social discontent within the black community, was a very unfortunate casualty. Sirgo's widow established the Louis Sirgo Memorial Award, honoring promising recruits in the NOPD, keeping his legacy alive and honoring his work in trying to mend race relations. Essex was profiled in a 1982 documentary, The Killing of America, which highlighted Mark Essex's rampage. Mark Essex was not the first mass shooter and not the last, but he is a demonstrable facet of the fabric of what happens when delusional theory and personal animosity manifest into a rage impulse.
KTBC Television News now presents a special program on today's mass murder in the capital city. Here is KTBC Television News Editor Neil Spells.
Good evening. One of history's worst mass murders occurred here in Austin today. By official count tonight, 49 persons were hit by gunfire. There are 16 dead and 33 injured. It started last...
On August 1st, 1966, chaotic news reports filled the airwaves of the United States about a mass shooting taking place at the University of Texas. As the days wore on, more information emerged as to the shooter and the complete circumstances surrounding this event. It seemed as if no one could stop the madman. Eventually called the University of Texas Tower shooting, the highly trained lone sniper had, in 96 minutes, killed 15 people from distances of 500 yards and wounded another 31 before he was finally silenced by two brave Austin City Police Department officers in an epic gun battle that nearly cost them their own lives. The shooting would be the worst in American history until the San Isidro McDonald's massacre on July 18, 1984. But how and why did it happen? Who was Charles Joseph Whitman? What events in his life shaped his emotional development? What motivated him to randomly shoot strangers? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, a veteran of the United States Army and Marine Corps, former history professor, book author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. Charles Joseph Whitman was born on June 24, 1941 in Lake Worth, Florida, the eldest of three sons born to Charles Adolphus Whitman Jr. and his wife, Margaret Elizabeth Whitman. His father was born in 1919 and had been abandoned as a child and raised in a boys' orphanage in Savannah, Georgia. Despite this beginning, he ran a successful plumbing business with wife Margaret employed as his bookkeeper. Young Charles and his siblings endured a torturous yet financially stable childhood, as their father was an abusive alcoholic and well known in town for being a tyrant. In fact, one of the Whitman's neighbors, one Judy Falch, stated, that she was unable to recollect the sheer number of times her own parents had called police in the 1940s and 50s in response to Whitman's father beating his wife, children, and family pets. Whitman was an extremely intelligent child, and he did well in school. He became a Boy Scout at age 11, becoming an Eagle Scout 3 months after his 12th birthday. In this achievement, he is reportedly the youngest scout ever to earn this rank as fast as he did at that time and in the shortest time span. Graduating from St. Anne's High School in West Palm Beach in June 1959, Whitman graduated 7th out of a class of 72 students. Not long afterward, he and several friends became very intoxicated, and upon returning home, his father severely beat him and then threw him into the family swimming pool. Deciding to leave home, Whitman enlisted in the United States Marine Corps and was assigned to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where he was an outstanding Marine. In 1961, he was awarded a scholarship, approved and funded by the Naval Enlisted Science Education Program, and enrolled in the University of Texas at Austin, which was one path to getting an officer's commission, and he studied mechanical engineering. The post-shooting investigation into his background brought many interesting things to light. Whitman was considered a friendly person by his classmates, with a good sense of humor, although tinged with a dark side. One of his fellow students, Francis Shook Jr., has said that Whitman once looked out of their dormitory window at the tower on campus and said to him, "A person could stand off an army from the top of it before they got to him." While he was at the university, he met a fellow student, Kathleen Frances Leisner, and they were married on August 17, 1962 in St. Michael's Catholic Church in Needville, Texas, 6 months after their first meeting. They honeymooned in New Orleans. Whitman's seemingly relaxed attitude to his studies, probably from distractions, resulted in his scholarship being revoked for substandard performance. His new duty assignment was at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where he would complete his enlistment. In November 1963, he was subjected to a court-martial after being caught gambling in the barracks and working as a loan shark to other Marines. Due to a lack of evidence and witnesses to testify, the charges were dropped, and he managed to reach Lance Corporal before being discharged in December 1964. He and his wife returned to Austin, Texas in March 1965, and he re-enrolled back in school studying architectural engineering while his wife became a biology teacher at nearby Lanier High School. Also, during this period, he managed to obtain his real estate license while taking a full academic load of 12 to 15 semester hours. In March 1966, Whitman went to Florida to help his mother pack as she was leaving and divorcing his father after 25 years of abuse. Whitman even had a local policeman at the home in case his father became violent towards him or her as she was trying to leave, which, given his recorded history, was a very good idea. This was just one more weight added to Whitman's personal life, and as a result of all the pressure he was experiencing, as well as frequent migraine headaches, he entered therapy with a campus psychiatrist named Dr. Maurice Heaton. This would be the only professional psychological help Whitman pursued. The investigation also showed that at 6:45 p.m. on July 31, 1966, Whitman typed the first of 2 notes. In these, he explained how and why he would kill his wife and mother prior to the shooting spree. Another revelation was that he was interrupted while typing these suicide notes by 2 friends named Larry and Elaine Fuse. Both later stated that Whitman seemed particularly relieved about something, as if he's solved a problem. And that twice during the visit, Whitman had said, "It's a shame Kathleen should have to work all day and then come home too," but he never completed his sentences. After a few hours, the Fuses left, so Whitman could drive his wife home from her part-time job as a switchboard operator. It is believed that upon arriving at home, Kathleen Whitman went directly to bed. The post-event investigation also surmised that around 12:30 a.m., Whitman drove to his mother's apartment on Guadalupe Street near the university and stabbed her to death. He then covered her with the bed sheets and placed her on the bed, and then placed the second of the 2 notes upon a yellow legal pad beside her bed. He returned home around 3 a.m. and repeatedly stabbed his wife through the heart as she was asleep, and he also left the first note, which was handwritten. In both notes, he stated that he loved them both but killed them to spare them the humiliation of his pending actions. In the note left with his mother, he stated that he wanted to alleviate her suffering after decades of abuse by his father. He also clearly stated his intense hatred beyond description for his father because of the years of physical and emotional abuse. What he did for the next few hours is unknown, but later, in the first morning hours, he stopped and rented a hand truck. He then drove to his bank and cashed several bad checks totaling $250, worth about $2,500 today, one from his own account and the other from his mother's account. At 9 o'clock, he drove to a hardware store and purchased a .30 caliber Universal M1 carbine, a weapon with which he had become a sharpshooter in the Marines, 2 extra magazines, and 8 boxes of ammunition. He told the cashier that he was going to Florida to hunt wild hogs. 30 minutes later, he drove to Chuck's gun shop, purchased 4 more magazines, 6 additional boxes of ammunition, a can of gun cleaning solvent, and then he drove to a Sears and Roebuck store where he bought a 12-gauge semi-automatic shotgun. Whitman then returned to his garage at home and sawed off the buttstock and barrel of the shotgun. He then placed all these items as well as cans of food, coffee, vitamins, Dexedrine, Excedrin, earplugs, 3.5 gallons of water, matches, lighter fluid, rope, binoculars, a machete, 3 knives, a small Channel Master transistor radio, toilet paper, a razor, a bottle of deodorant, a Remington 700 6mm bolt-action hunting rifle with a Leupold M8 4-power scope, and a .35 caliber pump rifle, a 9mm Luger pistol, a Galisi Brescia 25 caliber pistol, a Smith & Wesson M19 357 Magnum revolver, and 700 rounds of ammunition into his Marine Corps footlocker. He was also dressed in blue nylon khaki coveralls over his shirt and jeans so that people would think that he was a janitor, a repairman, or a delivery man, or some other service person, so as to not arouse any suspicion when he arrived at the university at 11:25 a.m. When he arrived, he showed a campus guard a fake research assistant identification card so that he could get a 40-minute parking space as he was delivering teaching equipment to a professor, which would explain the footlocker. He then went to the main building of the university and is believed to have entered the lower tower entrance between 11:30 and 11:35 a.m. This may have been timed to coincide with the 11:45 student class changeover, which would have provided more targets. When he entered, he found that the elevator did not work. An employee named Vera Palmer later stated that she thought he was a repairman, and she told him that the elevator had been turned off, so she turned the switch on to activate it. Whitman smiled as he thanked Palmer, stating, "Thank you, ma'am. You don't know how happy that makes me," several times. He reached the 27th floor and rolled the dolly with the footlocker up a final flight of stairs to a hallway leading to the observation deck. In a series of strange events, Whitman encountered the 51-year-old receptionist, Edna Townsley, inside the reception area. He then beat her into unconsciousness, splitting her skull with his rifle butt, and then dragged her still breathing body behind the sofa. While doing so, a couple named Donald Walden and Cheryl Botts entered the room from the observation deck as he leaned over the couch. Botts later stated to the police that she and Walden believed Whitman was about to shoot pigeons, being that he was armed. She simply smiled and greeted Whitman, who smiled back and said, "Hi, how are you?" as if nothing had happened, despite both Walden and Botts both seeing the dark blood stains on the carpet, and according to their statements, they both just assumed it was varnish or paint. After they left, Whitman barricaded the door leading to the lounge using Townsley's desk, 2 chairs, and a wastebasket. As he was entering the observation deck, a vacationing Texarkana, Arkansas family were leaving, and they tried to get past his hastily made barricade. One of the family members, 16-year-old Mark Gabor, tried to push the entrance to the staircase open, and Whitman fired with his shotgun, killing the boy and his 56-year-old aunt, Marguerite Lamport, and seriously wounding 19-year-old Michael Gabor and his 41-year-old mother, Mary. Whitman then repaired his barricade. The father, 48-year-old Michael Gabor Sr., and William Lamport were both uninjured and ran from the stairwell before attempting to provide care for their family members. Then they ran for help. Mr. Gabor then met Vera Palmer exiting an elevator on the 27th floor. She was coming to the receptionist position to relieve Edna Townsley as it was her shift. Gabor told Palmer what had happened as she returned to the ground floor to get help. Whitman must have known that the alarm would be raised, so he completed the barricade repair and then fired a shot into Townsley's head to finish her off. At around 11:46 a.m., he placed his footlocker in the 6-foot-wide observation deck and wedged the dolly against the door, which was the only avenue of approach. He then put on a white headband and placed his weapons around all 4 sides of the deck for immediate access. He was 231 feet above the plaza and began shooting at 11:48. The first person he shot was an 18-year-old, Claire Wilson, who was 8 months pregnant, killing the child. She survived. All of his victims were between the ages of 17 and 64, both students and passers-by. Most of Whitman's victims were shot within the first 15 minutes of his shooting spree. Most were shot either on the campus or across the plaza on Guadalupe Street, which the locals called the Drag, where shoppers entered the stores, cafes, and a couple of bookstores. There was some mass confusion, as many who heard the shots thought the noise was from a nearby construction site. Soon the word spread, and the response was rapid. Several ambulances were called, including hearses from a nearby funeral home, and a bank delivery armored car drove into the line of fire to try and rescue the victims. Some bystanders braved the fire and went to assist the wounded and dying. 4 minutes after he started shooting, the police arrived and located the source of the fire, and they maintained good suppressive fire, forcing Whitman to keep his head down. His only viewpoints were through the 3 large storm drains at the bottom of the 4-foot-high observation deck walls. One of the first to arrive was 23-year-old Austin patrolman Billy Speed, who, along with another officer, took a position behind a columned stone wall. Whitman calmly shot through a 6-inch space between the 2 columns and killed Speed with a chest shot. Whitman still had a rather clear field of fire, and targets were plentiful. One of his next victims was 29-year-old electrical repairman Roy Dale Schmidt, who was killed 500 yards from the tower, as well as a 30-year-old funeral director named Morris Harlan, who was seriously wounded as he hid behind the ambulance where he had transported people to the various hospitals. The police brought in sharpshooter Marion Lee, who boarded a Champion Citabria, a 2-seat light aircraft, hoping to get in close enough to get a clear shot as the light plane circled the tower. The problem was that it was a very hot day, and the thermals rising upward did not provide a stable platform buffeting the aircraft, but it stayed overhead as a distraction to interrupt Whitman's shooting and hopefully minimize casualties. One man was a retired Air Force tail gunner, Alan Crum, who treated teenager Alec Hernandez, who was wounded just outside the university bookstore that he managed. He went to the scene near the base of the tower, where Whitman did not have a clear line of sight, and met with Department of Public Safety agent William Cowan and Austin police officer Jerry Day. They went up the elevator, and Cowan gave Crum a rifle. Officer Ramiro Martinez was off duty that day and at home when he heard the news on the radio, so he arrived and joined Crum, Day, and Cowan, and they all met on the 26th floor and were greeted by officers Jack Rodman and Leslie Gieber. They had been talking with Mr. Gabber, who told them what happened to his family. Rodman and Gieber returned to ground level and told Vera Palmer to hit all elevator buttons, shut them down, while Martinez and Crum ascended and continued to the observation deck. Crum asked, "Are we playing for keeps?" Martinez responded, "You're damned right we are," to which Crum replied, "Well, you better deputize me." Martinez replied, "Consider yourself deputized." When they arrived, they found the bodies of Marguerite Laporte and Mark Gabor, and the wounded Mary Gabor and her son, Michael, wounded but coherent. He pointed and told them, "He's up there." After treating Mary Gabor, they continued and found the dead Edna Townsley. Martinez and Crum were joined by McCoy, going left, after Martinez and Day flanking on Crum's right, with Crum covering the middle. Crum, hearing Whitman's footsteps, fired a shot to distract Whitman and gave the flanking officers more time. Whitman was spotted by Martinez, who fired all 6 shots from his service revolver, missing Whitman, as McCoy broke cover and fired at Whitman's white headband, hitting him between the eyes with several pellets from his shotgun. McCoy then fired a second time, striking Whitman on his left side. Whitman fell to the ground, and Martinez then grabbed McCoy's shotgun and ran to Whitman and fired into Whitman's left arm at point-blank range. All the while, the officers on the ground had been firing up into the tower, and they were unaware that Whitman was already dead. Crum broke out his white handkerchief as the police radioed down that it was over. In a sense of explainable irony due to the confusion, the on-scene reporters broadcast that the sniper was waving a white flag to surrender, which was not the case. By 3 p.m., the event was on national radio, and Whitman's father called in to tell them that it was in fact his son. He also gave them the names and addresses of his son, his wife, and his ex-wife. The police arrived at both locations to make notifications and found the bodies and the notes. Then the investigation started. Dr. Heaton came forward and told the authorities of his contacts with Whitman. The FBI and local police studied Dr. Heaton's notes. What they learned was that Whitman was a man full of self-loathing over the fact that he had twice struck his wife during their marriage, and he feared that he would become like his father. Whitman apparently had an egocentric persona, and he had constantly pushed himself to be better than others in every endeavor. The notes from Dr. Heaton also illustrated that he had been oozing with hostility throughout his session, where Whitman had discussed fantasies of shooting random people from the observation deck of the University of Texas Tower. This would prove to be the sole occasion in which Whitman sought any professional help pertaining to the sources of frustration and pressure in his life. He was also under great mental strain due to his father calling him, often drunk, almost every day, demanding that he convince his mother to return to Florida. During Whitman's autopsy, a pecan-sized tumor was located in the white matter above his amygdala, but the tumor was not connected to any sensory nerves. It was because of this tumor that some experts believe that he may have contributed to the violent impulses that Whitman had demonstrated over several years prior to the Texas Tower Massacre. The tragedy of that day is still felt in Austin, Texas. Whitman killed 17 people in total and wounded 31 others. A 17-year-old named Karen Jun Griffith died from her injuries 1 week later, and David Hubert Gunby, shot from the tower at age 23, died from complications from his wound 35 years later, and his death was officially ruled a homicide. Whitman carefully chose his killing ground. He made sure that he had clear avenues of approach and sealed off his rear area, which also eliminated any chance of escape. But that was not his intention. He became the first so-labeled mass shooter in U.S. history. Unfortunately, he would not be the last.
Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.